What is this?
Welcome to History 1, where the shadows of Europe's past whisper their darkest truths. Subscribe now and never miss the secrets history tried to bury. They found the body floating face down in the icy river, the crown ring still on his finger. His throat was cut clean, too clean for a robbery, too deliberate for a lover's quarrel. The moon above the palace reflected off the water like a watchful eye, silent, judging. The year was 1780, and Europe trembled at the edge of revolution. But that night, in the heart of Vienna, a royal death would ignite a series of betrayals, alliances, and hidden sins that would alter the balance of power across the continent. For 2 centuries, historians have argued whether Archduke Ferdinand von Hohenberg died by accident, by suicide, or by a hand that wore a ring of its own, one bearing the mark of the royal bloodline. But buried in a collection of letters, sealed for over 100 years and discovered only recently in the walls of Schönbrunn Palace, lies a confession written in trembling ink, one that names not only the killer, but the reason why Europe's noblest families spent decades silencing the truth. This is the story of the royal murder mystery that changed European history. It began on a night of music and mirrors, a masquerade ball held in the imperial court of Austria. Candles flickered against polished marble. Velvet gowns whispered across the floor. Beneath the laughter and the sound of violins, there was something else. The quiet tension of people who all wore masks, even without the silk and lace. Archduke Ferdinand was not the most powerful man in Europe, but he was dangerous in another way, a man of secrets. He had letters, rumors said, that could expose affairs, illegitimate heirs, and backroom dealings between monarchs who smiled at one another in public, yet plotted in private. He was known for his charm and his cruelty. Servants whispered that he toyed with people's lives like cards in a deck. A single word from him could raise a family to nobility or destroy them overnight. At the masquerade, he danced with a woman no one recognized, her mask black as ink, her gown embroidered with gold thread that shimmered like fire. Witnesses later said she spoke to him softly, her hand lingering on his wrist longer than custom allowed. Some said they saw him slip her a folded paper. Others swore it was she who gave it to him. An hour later, Ferdinand was gone. When dawn came, his carriage was found overturned near the Danube, the horses missing, and the Archduke's body drifting in the water. The official report, signed by the royal physician, said his death was a tragic accident. His sister, Archduchess Helena, wept at the funeral. His younger brother, Maximilian, inherited his estates. And the woman in the black mask was never seen again, or so the court was told. What few knew was that 3 days after Ferdinand's death, a sealed envelope arrived at the royal library, addressed only with a symbol, a serpent coiled around a crown. Inside was a single page. On it were 6 words, written in Ferdinand's own hand. The bloodline is not what it seems. The message was destroyed. Or at least, it was meant to be, because someone, a quiet, forgotten archivist named Emil Hartmann, made a copy, and he hid it. 2 centuries later, when the palace underwent restoration, workers found a hollow space behind a wall panel. Inside were water-damaged letters, some sealed with wax, others stained with age, and among them, Emil's confession. What those letters revealed would rewrite not just the story of one murder, but the history of Europe itself. Because Ferdinand had discovered something far more dangerous than any political plot. A truth about royal blood and how far those who ruled would go to keep their secrets buried. And the first thread of that secret began, not in Austria, but in France, 50 years earlier, with a forbidden affair, a forged birth certificate, and a promise sealed in blood. The affair began in Versailles, under chandeliers that glittered like frozen tears. The French court in the mid-1700s was a theater of excess, silk, perfume, gossip, and sin all wrapped in gold. Every smile hid a secret. Every secret could destroy a life. Among the courtiers, few shone brighter than Duchess Éléonore de Vignacourt, lady-in-waiting to the Queen. She was known for her beauty, her wit, and her strange fascination with fate. Whispers said she visited astrologers, carried a vial of mercury around her neck, and spoke in riddles when the moon was full. But Éléonore harbored something darker than superstition, a love that should never have existed. Her secret was Prince Louis Auguste, the king's own cousin, a man bound by duty to another noblewoman. To love Éléonore was to commit treason of the heart, and yet, in the hidden corridors behind the Hall of Mirrors, they met beneath candlelight, their reflections multiplying endlessly in the glass. In 1749, Éléonore bore a child in secret. The birth was hidden by the royal physician, who recorded it under another name, Henri de Lys, a name that would echo through history. The boy was spirited away to Austria, raised in the care of a loyal retainer of the Habsburgs. Few knew why, fewer still cared to ask. But one man did, Archduke Ferdinand von Hohenberg. Decades later, as a young diplomat stationed in Paris, Ferdinand stumbled upon a series of coded letters in the archives of the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They were written in two hands, one unmistakably feminine, one bearing the royal cipher of the House of Bourbon. The letters spoke of the child of the mirror, of the bloodline bound by deceit, and of an oath sealed in silver. Ferdinand became obsessed. He traced the name Henri de Lys through baptismal records, only to find a trail deliberately obscured. Names altered, pages missing, ink washed away. It was as if someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to erase the existence of a single man. But Ferdinand had a gift, persistence mixed with arrogance. He bribed, blackmailed, seduced, anything to pry the truth from the shadows. By 1778, he believed he had it. Henri de Lys, he claimed, had not died in infancy as the records said. He had grown to adulthood under another name, Count Theodor von Weiss, a figure who had quietly entered the Austrian court some 20 years earlier, married into minor nobility, and served as an advisor to Empress Maria Theresa herself. And if Ferdinand's conclusions were correct, Count Theodor was no mere courtier. He was the illegitimate grandson of the King of France, and through a forgotten pact between the Bourbon and Habsburg families, his descendants had a legitimate claim to both thrones. Such a revelation could shatter Europe's balance of power. If true, it meant that the rulers of Austria and France shared a hidden heir, one neither kingdom wanted the world to know existed. Ferdinand realized the magnitude of what he had uncovered. He planned to use it, perhaps not for good, but for leverage. Rumor has it he even hinted to certain diplomats that he possessed a secret that could make or unmake kings. But someone else knew too. Theodor von Weiss had lived in peace for decades, serving loyally, raising children, his past buried like the foundations of the palace itself. When Ferdinand approached him privately, suggesting he knew his true identity, witnesses described Theodor's reaction as one of pale horror. 2 weeks later, Count Theodor vanished. His house was sealed, his servants dismissed, his name struck from official records. And 1 month after that, Archduke Ferdinand was found dead in the river. The court declared it coincidence, but history rarely believes in coincidences. Because after Ferdinand's death, an anonymous note was delivered to Archduchess Helena, his sister, with only one line written upon it. He knew the truth of the mirrored blood. No one ever found who sent it. But Helena, unlike her brother, was not reckless. She began her own quiet investigation, and what she uncovered would not only reveal the truth behind Ferdinand's death, but would show that the conspiracy had begun generations earlier, entwining the crowns of Austria, France, and even Britain in a pact sealed by deceit and murder. Archduchess Helena was nothing like her brother. Where Ferdinand was flamboyant, she was cautious. Where he was reckless, she was methodical. But above all, she possessed something her brother never had: patience. After his funeral, when the palace halls were still draped in black and courtiers whispered of curses, Helena spent her nights in silence. She requested all of Ferdinand's personal belongings be brought to her: his letters, journals, pocket, watch, and the small mahogany chest he kept locked at all times. It was that chest that drew her attention most. The key had been lost in the confusion following his death, but Helena was not deterred. On a moonless night, she ordered her maid to fetch a blacksmith, promising a month's pay for discretion. Inside the chest, among folded maps and sealed envelopes, Helena found a journal bound in red leather. Its pages were covered in her brother's unmistakable handwriting, slanted, aggressive, impatient. Each entry read like a confession, fragments of obsession. They think I am blind. They think I do not see how our family's veins are tainted with another's blood. France and Austria, one house, mirrored in deceit. The man they call Theodore is no servant of the crown. He is the crown, the reflection no one wishes to see. If I die suddenly, know that I did not drown by accident. The serpent wears velvet. That last line froze her. Helena knew her brother's mind could be dramatic, but the phrase, "the serpent wears velvet," lingered like poison. In Vienna's royal court, velvet was the signature fabric of one family, the House of Lorenz, a powerful lineage tied to the empress by marriage and whispered to control half the empire through money, marriages, and manipulation. The head of that house was Duke Alaric von Lorenz, a man revered in public but feared in private. His influence stretched beyond Austria, reaching the courts of Prussia, France, and even the Vatican. If Ferdinand had indeed threatened the Lorenz family with what he knew, his death might not have been a coincidence at all. Helena began her search discreetly. She visited the royal archives under the guise of studying family genealogy, asking to see records related to the House of Lorenz. Most clerks were cooperative until she reached for the oldest volumes. Those, she was told, were missing. Missing? She asked. Or removed? The archivist hesitated. They were reclaimed, Your Grace, by order of His Excellency, the Duke himself. That night, Helena wrote a letter to a trusted friend in France, Marquis Etienne de Valois, a scholar of history and known sympathizer to those who questioned royal power. She asked him to find any trace of a name, Henri Dully. Weeks passed without reply. Then, one cold morning in late January, a sealed envelope arrived bearing a French crest scorched at the edges. Inside was Etienne's reply, hurried, ink-smeared, desperate. My dearest Helena, the name you ask about, Dully, is forbidden in France. It was erased from the church records after 1750, but fragments remain. Henri Dulys was baptized under that name in Versailles, but not as a noble. His father was recorded as unknown. His godparent, however, bore the royal seal of the House of Bourbon. 2 witnesses signed the baptism. One was the royal physician, the other, Duke Alaric von Lorenz, the same man who now whispers in your empress's ear. Helena's blood ran cold. How could a Viennese duke have been present at a secret baptism in Versailles decades before his birth was even recorded in Austrian nobility? The dates didn't align, unless the man known as Duke Alaric was not who he claimed to be. Digging deeper, Helena discovered something even more unsettling. Portraits of the Lorenz line painted over the last century bore uncanny similarities. The same sharp jaw, same dark eyes, same faint scar beneath the left ear. Yet, according to the genealogical records, these were supposed to be different generations. It was as though the same man had reappeared under new names, new titles, and new centuries. And then came the rumor, one Helena overheard during a state dinner when wine had loosened tongues. A Prussian envoy spoke of the Duke's unnatural longevity, and another laughed it off, saying, "Perhaps he's found the philosopher's stone." Helena smiled politely, but inside she trembled. Could it be that the Duke's family had indeed mastered something forbidden, a way to preserve bloodlines, or souls, or secrets far beyond natural limits? As she stared at her brother's journal that night, one thought would not leave her mind. Perhaps Ferdinand hadn't been the first to die for discovering the truth. Perhaps he had only been the latest, and the serpent in velvet was still watching. Helena's nights grew restless. Every whisper in the corridors seemed sharper, every glance more watchful. In the royal court, smiles hid knives, and now she was certain some of those knives were meant for her. Still, she pressed on. The more she uncovered, the more the walls around her seemed to close in. Through secret correspondence with the Marquis Etienne, she learned of an old estate near Rouen, once owned by a forgotten branch of the Lorenz family. The place was abandoned after a fire in 1751, but among the ruins, local peasants still told stories. They spoke of the man who never aged, who would appear at dusk to light candles in the chapel before vanishing into mist. Helena needed proof, not legends. She summoned her most loyal aide, Captain Lucas Adler, a man who had served the Habsburgs in the Balkans, brave, discreet, and haunted by his own ghosts. "Find what the Lorenz family hides," she told him. "Go to France. Search the ruins near Rouen. Bring back anything that bears their crest, a serpent coiled around a crown." Lucas bowed, but before departing, he asked, "And if I find something that should not be found, Your Grace?" Helena looked him dead in the eye. "Then you'll know my brother was murdered." Weeks passed with no word. Then, one stormy evening, Helena was awoken by the sound of hooves on cobblestones. Lucas had returned, mud-stained, pale, clutching a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a book. Its cover was blackened by fire, its pages brittle. On the first page, written in faded Latin, were the words, "Liber Sanguinis Regalis," the book of royal blood. Lucas spoke little as she read, his voice hoarse from the journey. "The chapel beneath the estate," he said. "It wasn't a chapel at all. There were jars, bones, vials with names written in Latin. A laboratory, centuries old. They were experimenting." Helena turned the pages, her heart pounding. The book described methods of preserving bloodlines, not merely through genealogy, but through alchemy. It detailed experiments conducted by royal physicians and priests under the patronage of the Duke of Lorenz. Methods of extracting essence from blood, preserving it, transferring it. It was madness, or genius. The final entry was signed in French, not Latin. The experiment succeeds. The body decays, but the blood endures. The heir of Dulice will not die. Through the serpent, He is reborn. Helena's breath caught. The heir of Dulis. Could it be that the Duke, Alaric von Lorenz, was Henri Dulis himself? That he had lived on, taking new names, new faces, across generations? Lucas, trembling, drew something else from his coat. A signet ring. The same serpent and crown design. "I found it on a skeleton," he whispered, "buried beneath the altar." Helena examined it closely. Inside the ring, engraved so faintly it was almost invisible, were 3 letters, HDL. Her brother had been right. The serpent wore velvet, and velvet hid blood that refused to die. That night, Helena realized she was no longer safe. The Duke's reach extended into every corner of the empire, the church, the court, even the Empress's private guard. But she had one advantage. No one yet suspected that she knew. She decided to use that silence to her benefit. She would attend the upcoming winter ball, the same event Duke Alaric himself had organized in honor of the Empress, and confront him there, under the mask of diplomacy. When the night arrived, the palace glittered with light. The air smelled of roses and wax. The Duke entered in his usual elegance, tall, dressed in black velvet trimmed with silver. He moved like a man who had seen centuries pass and found them amusing. Helena approached, her heart steady despite the storm within her. "Your Grace," she greeted, bowing slightly. "It's been too long since you graced us with your presence." He smiled faintly. "Ah, the Archduchess. I see your brother's shadow lingers in your eyes." She forced a smile. "Perhaps, though I prefer the truth to shadows." His gaze sharpened. "Careful, my lady. Truth can be a dangerous indulgence." She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. "So can immortality." For the first time, the Duke's smile faltered. In that brief flicker of silence between the violins, Helena saw something. Not fear, but recognition. He knew she knew. The orchestra swelled again, and when she looked up, the Duke was gone. By the next morning, so was Lucas. All that remained in his quarters was a single note written in his hand. "They came for me in the night. Do not trust anyone, not even those in the crown's service. The serpent is everywhere." For Helena, the game had changed. This was no longer a search for truth. It was a fight for survival. And somewhere deep within the palace, perhaps beneath it, the ancient secret of the Lorenz family waited to reveal itself. The next few days passed in a fog of paranoia and silence. Servants whispered that the Archduchess had fallen ill, that she no longer took visitors, that she'd begun locking her chamber doors from the inside. None of them knew that every night Helena sat awake by candlelight, studying the book of royal blood, her trembling hands tracing the words that could ruin empires. The text described not merely alchemy, but continuation. It spoke of the doctrine of transmission, a ritual designed to transfer a man's consciousness into a living descendant through blood extraction and an elixir known only as vita caelestis. The final paragraph of the book contained a passage that froze her blood. "In the year of our Lord 1751, the vessel of Dulis shall pass into his heir. The serpent shall rise again beneath the crest of another crown." The same year, the Lorenz estate burned. The same year, Henri Dulis disappeared from all records. Helena whispered to herself, "He didn't die in that fire. He became the Duke." It was unthinkable, and yet every piece fit perfectly. If the Duke of Lorenz was indeed Henri Dulis reborn through his own bloodline, it meant that his identity, his very being, had persisted for decades, perhaps even centuries. He had infiltrated Europe's nobility by taking host after host, binding his essence to the ruling bloodlines of each generation. And worse, he might now be doing the same with the Habsburgs. Helena knew then that Ferdinand hadn't merely stumbled upon an affair or a hidden heir. He had uncovered a blood ritual of royal immortality, and he had paid for it with his life. Determined to expose the truth, Helena began to plan her next move. She summoned Father Matthias, an elderly Jesuit scholar who had once served as confessor to the Empress. The priest was frail, but his mind remained sharp, and his loyalty lay not with the court, but with God. Helena met him in the palace crypt, away from prying eyes. The air smelled of candle wax and dust. "Father," she began, "you once told me that sin leaves a stain no prayer can wash away. What if that stain has lived for centuries?" The old man studied her face. "You have found something, haven't you?" She handed him the burned book. "This, and a name, Henri de Lys. The Duke of Lorraine is not what he appears." Matthias turned the brittle pages, his expression tightening. "I have heard whispers of this before," he murmured. "The Sanguine Pact, a heresy condemned by the Church centuries ago. They said some among the nobility sought to defy death through blood rites. The Vatican ordered every trace destroyed. And yet," Helena said, "here it is again, living in silk and velvet." The priest nodded grimly. "If what you say is true, Your Grace, then this man is beyond mortal judgment. His existence is an abomination." Helena leaned closer. "Then help me end it." Matthias hesitated, crossing himself. "To destroy such evil, you would need to sever the lineage itself, the vessel that holds the blood. If the Duke has indeed renewed himself through your family's line, then someone within your house carries his essence." Helena's eyes widened. "Someone in my family?" The priest nodded. "Perhaps one of royal birth, taken ill often but never dying, a child of strange resemblance. The curse always leaves traces." Her heart pounded. She thought of her nephew, young Prince Otto, sickly since birth, yet with eyes far too old for a child. He had once spoken words no child should know, quoting phrases in Latin that no tutor had taught him. Could it be? Helena stood, shaking. "Father, I must go." "Your Grace, be careful," Matthias warned. "If this man is truly the serpent of old, he will not let his blood be spilled again, and he will know you carry the truth." That night, Helena went to the nursery. The corridors were quiet, the candles nearly out. She entered softly, but the room was empty. Otto's bed was cold, the window stood open, and on the pillow lay a velvet ribbon, dark as midnight, with a serpent-shaped clasp of silver. Her blood ran cold. Then, a sound behind her, slow footsteps. She turned. Duke Alaric von Lorentz stood in the doorway, illuminated by moonlight, his face serene, his eyes gleaming with something that was neither malice nor mercy, only eternity. "Looking for someone, my dear?" he asked softly. Helena's throat went dry. "What have you done with him?" The Duke smiled faintly. "Nothing. Yet, the child is precious to me. In him I continue." Helena's hand trembled toward the candle holder beside her. "You're a monster." He tilted his head. "Monster? No, my lady. I am history itself. I am what your brother tried to name, and what you should have left buried." She lifted the candle holder as a weapon, but he did not flinch. "You cannot kill what has already lived 100 lives," he whispered. Then he stepped forward, and the candle flame flickered out. When morning came, the palace servants found the nursery empty, the window shattered, and the Archduchess gone. Only the faint scent of iron lingered in the air, and beneath the bed, half hidden in the dust, lay the red leather journal of Archduke Ferdinand. now marked with a fresh line in Helena's handwriting. The serpent has taken a new vessel. If I do not return, burn this book. Do not let history repeat itself. But history always repeats itself, because 3 years later, portraits of young Prince Otto began circulating across Europe. In them, he looked radiant, almost ethereal, and unmistakably older. Too old for his years. His eyes gleamed with calm intelligence, his smile composed and ancient. And on his hand, clearly visible, was a ring bearing the symbol of a serpent coiled around a crown. The portrait spread quickly, first through Vienna, then Paris, and finally to London, where whispers began to stir among diplomats and scholars. Some admired the artistry. Others remarked uneasily that the boy's expression seemed too knowing. In candlelit salons, guests murmured, "Look at his eyes. That's not a child's gaze." By then, Helena had been missing for nearly 3 years. Officially, the court declared she'd succumbed to illness during travel to a convent in Bavaria. Unofficially, no one dared to speak of her again. The Empress herself forbade mention of the Archduchess's name, a silence that felt less like mourning and more like obedience to something unseen. Yet not everyone had forgotten. One man, Father Matthias, still clung to his faith and his guilt. He kept Helena's last note hidden beneath the altar of a small church on the edge of Vienna, along with a copy of the Book of Royal Blood. Every night he prayed before it, begging forgiveness for what he had helped uncover. But one evening, as he knelt, he felt a chill behind him, the faintest breath, like someone standing in the shadows. "Still clinging to your God, Father?" a voice asked. Calm, cultured, unmistakably familiar. Matthias froze. Slowly, he turned. The Duke of Lorens stood before the altar, though no carriage had arrived, no door had opened. His face was unchanged. His eyes glimmered faintly in the candlelight. "Where is she?" Matthias demanded, his voice shaking. "Helena." The Duke smiled gently. She served her purpose. She helped preserve the line. She should be proud. Matthias's fingers clutched the crucifix. "You've damned yourself," he whispered. "You've made a mockery of creation." The Duke's smile widened. "Creation? My dear priest, I have merely perfected it. The flesh decays. The spirit endures. That is the divine truth your church could never accept." He stepped closer, and Matthias could smell the faint trace of iron. Blood. "Tell me," the Duke continued, "did she tell you about the boy?" Matthias remained silent. "He carries me now," the Duke said softly. "The cycle is complete, and when his body withers, another will take its place. Blood is memory, Father, the only true immortality." The priest raised the crucifix. "Then may that blood burn." The Duke's eyes flared, his expression momentarily darkening. The faintest crack in the mask of composure. Then, just as suddenly, he smiled again. "Faith is a beautiful thing," he murmured, "but it has no place in history." When the sacristan entered the chapel the next morning, Father Matthias was gone. The candles still burned, untouched. The Bible lay open on the altar, its pages soaked in blood. Years passed. Empires shifted. The American colonies rose in rebellion. France teetered on the edge of its own revolution. Yet in Vienna, the young Prince Otto von Hohenberg grew into a figure of fascination, brilliant, poised, and disturbingly precocious. At age 12, he spoke 4 languages fluently. At 15, he debated philosophy with bishops and mathematicians, but what unsettled those around him was not his intellect. It was the coldness in it. Once, a tutor recorded in his journal, "The boy does not laugh. He speaks as though recalling memories that cannot be his. At times, when the light falls across his face, I swear I see the shadow of an older man. Rumors spread, quiet ones, spoken only behind locked doors. Have you seen the ring he wears? It's the same symbol as the old Duke's. But the Duke's been dead for years. Has he? One winter's evening, the Empress held a banquet to celebrate Otto's 18th birthday. The grand hall was alive with candlelight, the air thick with perfume and politics. Among the guests were nobles from across Europe, including several who had known Duke Alaric von Lorenz personally, or claimed to. As Otto entered, conversation fell to a hush. He was tall now, strikingly composed, his expression unreadable. On his hand, gleaming against the lace cuff, was the serpent ring. An aging French ambassador whispered, pale-faced, "My God, it's him. It's the same eyes." Throughout the night, Otto moved through the room with effortless grace, speaking little, observing much. When one minister drunkenly asked if he had any memory of the late Duke, Otto smiled faintly and replied, "Memory is a curious thing, minister. Sometimes it belongs not to the man, but to the blood." The table fell silent. Later that evening, a servant found the minister collapsed in the corridor, his skin drained of color, his lips blue. The cause of death, a sudden failure of the heart. The court physician called it an unfortunate tragedy. Otto simply watched as they carried the body away, expressionless. Outside the palace walls, revolution brewed across Europe. Monarchies trembled. The old order began to die, and yet, within the gilded halls of Vienna, one bloodline remained untouched, eternal. The serpent still coiled around the crown, and though Helena's name was erased from history books, her final warning endured, hidden among the letters found centuries later. If the line endures, so too does the curse. Beware the child who remembers too much. For those who read these words today, perhaps you think this tale a fable, a Gothic legend of courts and curses. But then, history itself is written by those who survive it, and the last known portrait of Prince Otto, painted in 1805, shows him standing beside a chair draped in black velvet. His hand rests upon it gently, as though on the shoulder of an invisible companion. If you look closely, too closely, you might see the faint outline of another figure in the shadows, a man with the same face. Thank you for listening to this dark chapter of history. If you wish to hear more hidden stories the world tried to bury, subscribe to History 1 and step with us once again into the shadows of the past. ChatGPT ko the Mac Loi. Haikiem Trakashthong Tin Quan Trong.